Hi, Susan. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hello. Hi, Jason. Hi, Harsha. Good evening, Emily, Susan. Good to see everyone. Yeah. All right. So, good evening and welcome back. I was taking a bit of a break last week for the holiday. So, we're back for the Tuesday tune in. And as usual, a treat to see everyone. And so, yes, as usual, this evening, I'm going to begin with a guided meditation. And given our topic this evening, I think that I'd like to focus on just one of the four elements. So, we're going to do a bit of a body scan. And just begin by settling into your meditation posture. It's fine to have your camera on or off, but please do mute your mic if you haven't already done so. Just sensing the body settling on your seat. Allowing the belly to relax and soften. And allowing that steady base to continue to settle and relax. And from that steady base, allowing the spine to come into alignment. All the way up through the neck and the head. And beginning at the crown of the head, becoming aware of the presence of the earth element. And the earth element is characterized by stability. Just beginning to scan downward, starting at the crown of the head, and just becoming aware of the earth element in every cell of the body. Moving the attention slowly down the neck, sensing the stability, natural groundedness. Then the attention moving down the right shoulder, slowly, slowly down the right arm, knowing earth as this body. Moving the attention now down through the lower arm and reaching the right hand. Aware of earth. Shifting to the left hand. And slowly moving the attention up the left arm. Just knowing the presence of the earth element throughout the body. Eventually arriving at the left shoulder. And slowly beginning to move down the torso. Just knowing the presence of earth in every cell of the body. That natural stability. The attention slowly moving down through the lower abdomen. and the hips. Steady earth element. And then moving the attention down the right leg. Knowing the presence of earth. Eventually arriving at the right foot, also pervaded by earth element. Shifting to the left foot. And slowly coming up the left leg. Just knowing that stability, firmness of earth in each cell. Eventually arriving again at the hips. Knowing the earth element. And slowly, slowly moving back up the torso. all the way up to the right shoulder. And back down the right arm, taking your time. Knowing this body as earth, steady, stable. Aware of earth element as the right hand. And the left hand, pervaded by earth. And moving the attention of the left arm and the left shoulder. Sensing that stability. And back up through the neck and the head. Slowly scanning, attending to the earth element as this body. And once you arrive at the top of the head, then opening the attention to the whole body at once. Opening the attention to the whole body from head to toe. Still aware of the natural stability of earth throughout the body. Attending to the body, knowing it as the earth element. Firmness, stability. And in these last few minutes of the meditation, also knowing the earth element beneath you. Same earth element, internally and externally. Beautiful. So that was our meditation practice for this evening. And as usual, I'll take any questions or comments about that at the end. Right now, going to go ahead and transition into the Dhamma talk for the evening. So I'll spend about maybe 38 minutes or so on that, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So go ahead and adjust your posture if that's helpful, or adjust your settings there. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. What do you see when you look in the mirror? You see some image that you think of as yourself. Maybe you like what you see there, you don't like what you see there. Maybe it depends on the day or how the hair is doing. Hmm? There's some way that you look in the mirror and you know that that's you, or you believe that that's you. You see something that you interpret as you. And if there were simply the mere reflection, the mere knowing of that observation, then there's clarity. There would be clarity. But I would propose that oftentimes it's not that simple. It's not that clear. Even though you might think that you're not doing any interpreting or any way of adding anything on to what you see, still there is something imputed. That sense of self. And the reason why we study this in Buddhist practice, particularly in early Buddhist practice, is to begin to have a sense of the fleeting nature of our experience, the fleeting nature of a human life. And to really know it in your bones. There's this phrase in the ancient language of Pali, in which early Buddhism has been mostly captured and passed on. Kayena pusitva, having touched it with the body. Because truly this body is our interface with the world. It's the way that we know the world and we find our place in it, both literally and figuratively, through this body, through our experience of this body and the contacts, the environment that we find ourselves in. But then there's this added part, right? And there's this added part. And so tonight I wanted to speak a little bit about a sutta that's maybe very familiar to some of you. It's one of the more well-known sutta, and sutta just means a discourse by the historical Buddha, 25 or 2600 years ago or so, or his students, female and male students known as monks and nuns and monks in that order. And in these discourses, there's a whole section. So we have 5 main texts in early Buddhism, and they're known as the Nikayas. The collections of discourses. And so this is from the so-called linked discourses or the connected discourses that are arranged according to themes. And there's a whole chapter on something called the 5 aggregates. So some of you have heard me talk before about the 5 aggregates. And it's some people would refer to it as a list, but I prefer to think of it as a framework for how to think about our bodies and minds and how they interact and how they relate to the rest of the world. And they're called the aggregates because they're aggregating together into categories a whole myriad of different types of experiences, right? A human life has an incredible variety of experience, so much so that each one of us is experiencing something different. We each have a particular, a unique set of experiences. And yet those experiences can be understood. They have within them certain principles that are universal. So both things are true, the specific and the universal. And if both things were not true, then it wouldn't make sense to talk about it at all, right? Because if it were only the specific, then there would be no way for us to relate to one another's experience. But if there were only the universal, then it would all be identical and you'd only need to teach it once. We'd all already know. But it is both. It is both. So just to say a word, so the sutta that I brought today is from, as I said, from the Connected Discourses, and it is from chapter 22, which is a set of over 150 discourses that the historical Buddha and his students gave about this particular framework, this particular way of understanding body and mind. And there are many, many more, hundreds more within the other discourses. So, there are thousands and thousands of discourses that are collected in the suttas. But we're just going to look at this, maybe one or two. You know me, I have a hard time stopping at just one. But we'll start with the Lump of Foam Sutta. That's the name of the one that we're going to look at today. And so the Buddha begins, as usual, it begins, thus have I heard, although when you open up the book, and particularly these books where there are these compilations of all of the hundreds or thousands of them that go along with each Nikaya, that's been redacted. It's only said once at the beginning, and then it's understood within the rest of them. And it tells the occasion of where the Buddha was at that time, what city, what town he was in, and by what river sometime. So it kind of locates him in time and who he was speaking to at that time. And that's, I think, part of a memory, a tool for memory from Venerable Ananda. Venerable Ananda was the Buddha's attendant and is the one who is said to have recited these later on so that they could be carried on verbally for some time and then eventually written down centuries later. So this happened at Ayodhya by the Ganges, the river Ganges. So if any of you have been to India, maybe you have a sense of where that is. And he begins by saying, suppose that the river Ganges was carrying along on it a great lump of foam. Right? So this is what the sutta is named after. Suppose that you looked out at the river and you saw that there was this big lump of foam in the river. Then you would look at it and investigate it, and you would see that it is insubstantial. Right? And the Buddha says, in the same way, this body of ours, what we call form, the first of the 5 khandhas, is form. Form is usually understood in early Buddhism to be made up of the 4 elements, the 4 great elements of earth, water, fire, and air. And those are generally used as shorthand for the characteristics that they are related to, right? So today we did the meditation on earth as a way of feeling the natural groundedness and stability and steadiness of the body, right? So that's the characteristic associated with earth, and so on. And you have water as flowing, fire as warmth, and air as movement, and also a kind of spaciousness. So the form is like a lump of foam. This body is like a lump of foam. So think about that for a second. It's the equivalent to that thing on the top of your latte. Or if you wash dishes by hand, that stuff that's coming out of the sponge, right? Little bit of foam that gets from the sponge onto your dishes and maybe onto the dishwater. Pretty insubstantial, right? Sometimes that little lump on top of your latte doesn't even last the whole drink, right? So this is the way to think about, this is one way to start to think about the body. and to start to enter into this understanding of how fleeting our body is, right? How insubstantial the body is, in a way that's really non-threatening, right? Very, very simple way to approach it. And then he goes on, and he goes on to talk about the next of the 5 aggregates. So the second aggregate is called feeling tone. It's Vedana. So rupa is the Pali word, and you all don't need to learn these words, but it helps me in order to keep on track with the 5 of them. So rupa is the form, that's the body, and things that emanate from the body, like tears and heat and waste and so on, spit. And then the Vedana is what we call feeling tone. And feeling tone is kind of interesting. Feeling tone is a very, very primitive pre-verbal cognition. And it's basically said to be on a spectrum between pleasant and unpleasant, and something that's neither of those. So usually we refer to it as neutral. And of course, there's a very broad spectrum of experience in there, from the most blissful, pleasant thing you can possibly think of, to the most agonizing, unpleasant thing you can think of, and everything in between. But this feeling tone is pre-verbal, and it's a way, you could say it's kind of a gut feeling that we have about any kind of contact that happens, about whether it's okay or not okay, or we don't care, right? Sometimes I say, it's going to eat me, or I'm going to eat it, or neither, or we don't care. So this is Vedana, this feeling tone. And the feeling tone is a very low level mental experience. And it tends to push us and pull us. We tend to want to lean into things that are pleasant and lean away from things that are unpleasant, and pretty much ignore anything that's in between. It's not juicy enough. Those are the kind of basic tendencies toward those things. So of course that's generalizing. Sometimes it's a little different. But the Buddha says, so you could think of the feeling tone as being like a water bubble, right? So if you stub your toe, then you have an unpleasant feeling tone arises, most generally, right? Unpleasant. And maybe you go around the house cursing for a few moments while you have to deal with the pain of that. But the Buddha says that thing is just as insubstantial as a little water on a puddle, a little drop, a little bubble on a puddle, right? Here one moment, gone the next. So you can visualize this. It's raining and there are drops of rain, and these little bubbles form and then they pop immediately. And it's just like that, right? No matter what degree of pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, it just has that very insubstantial quality to it. And then you have the perception. So perception is one that is probably more familiar to us. It's a labeling, right? So if you hear the sound of a car, then you think the word car. Or auto, si hablas español, right? If Spanish is your first language, or whatever language you happen to be thinking in, that's where it will come up. Right? So this way that we identify what the thing is, that's our perception. And now this is an important part of the world, right? What we call a thing has a lot to do with whether we think that thing is okay, whether we want that thing or not, whether that thing should be or shouldn't be in our lives. And yet the Buddha says, no, that perception is like a mirage. All perception is like a mirage. And that is a very interesting statement. All perception is like a mirage. So imagine for a second that you're driving down the road. It's a very hot day, right? And you look out on the road there, or maybe you're not driving, maybe you're just a passenger there. You look out on the road and you see a little shimmer on the road, and it looks like water, right? Looks like there's water on the road. And yet, as you drive, right, you keep getting closer and closer. And when you get closer, you realize, oh, there's no water there at all. It was just the phenomena of the heat. And so the perception of a thing, the labeling, the category that we give a thing, the way that we identify, all the things that we run into are just like that mirage. It's a pure concept, like a wisp of smoke. Less substantial even than a wisp of smoke. That's how much reality it has. And yet you look in the mirror and you have this idea about the hair and the eyes and the body and the thing. And I've always looked this way, and I want it to look like that, or I don't want it to look like that, or this is me, or this belongs to me. All a mirage. So you see very clearly, this is for me the most interesting metaphor of all, because it describes a way in which we can have a sense of self. That's the mirage. That's the shining on the road. We can have the sense of the self and know that there's something there. There is an actual physical and mental phenomena that's happening here in a human life. But that extra part is that self. That part, that shining water that's not actually there, that's the self. Even though it seems like it. So we've imputed something onto that experience of the physical and mental continuum of a life. Rather than experiencing the mere phenomena themselves and how fleeting they are and how conditional they are, how related they are to each other, and how they depend on the external environment, our inner workings, and so on. Excuse me. And then we have sankharas. So sankharas are is a very complicated word. It means something like compounded things in one sense. But here, when we talk about the aggregates, it means something more like reactions and responses, intention, stories, ways that we relate to. We talk about the perceptions that we had or the bodily experience. And so the metaphor for that is, it's like a plantain tree. Like a plant, it's like the trunk or the hardwood of a plantain tree. So now if any of you are from a tropical area where the plantain tree grows, or maybe you're a botanist, you might know that the plantain tree does not have a trunk. It does not have any hardwood at all. If you peel back those leaves, those big, so the plantain tree has these big, broad leaves that go out to the sides. And if you peel back those leaves, there's nothing there. Literally, it's just the leaves. There's no trunk. In fact, I know this from lived experience because when I was a young child, I lived in Florida for quite a bit of my childhood. And my dad had planted a plantain tree out in front of our house. And he watered it and watered it. You know, he wanted it to do well and get big and strong. And he watered it so much that, oops, he overwatered it. And the thing just fell over. Just the leaves got all soft and it just collapsed because there's no trunk. So all of those intentions, those stories, those ways that you think that you own the thing, those reactions, all of that is like the trunk of the plantain tree, right? And that metaphor, again, is like, you think about it, it means that the thoughts support one another, right? Just in the way that the leaves of the plantain tree, they wrap around one another and make it look like there's something more there, something more firm, something more solid, something more dependable. But it's not like that. It's just the way that the thoughts lean upon other thoughts, right? And wrap around other thoughts. And if you unpack that, then you see the emptiness of it. You see that it lacks substantiality. And then lastly, there's consciousness. Consciousness being, I would suggest, besides the body, the thing, the aggregate, the fifth aggregate. And I would say, of all the aggregates besides the body, it's the one that we're most likely to get identified with. We think we are this knowing, this one who looks out of your eyes, this observer, this one experiencing. You can come up with any number of ways of talking about it. And the metaphor for consciousness in the Lumpa Phom Sutta is, consciousness is like a magician's trick. So once again, there is a physical phenomena, and it looks like one thing, but it's actually not like that. Right? He didn't actually pull the rabbit out of the hat, or the card out of your ear, or the elephant out of the, box, or any of those things. That's just the magic trick. That's just what it looks like. So the fact that you think that consciousness defines you, or that consciousness has an essential eternal continuity to it, is a bit of a misnomer. It misses the way in which consciousness is also dependent on phenomena, dependent on the body, dependent on the moment-to-moment contacts. And when you see it that way, when you have that kayena pusitva, when you have that lived experience, that knowing it in the bones, that the consciousness is also fluctuating, momentary, then it's easy to see that it doesn't make sense to consider that yourself either. Something that you own, or that you could control or shape in significant ways, in permanent ways, let's say. And it was interesting because it's interesting for many reasons, but I would say one thing that I was talking with another Dharma teacher about, Shaila Catherine, she's very well known for the concentration meditation. She was saying that her teacher, the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, so a Burmese teacher, and now that country is known as Myanmar, and they're in the middle of a very difficult civil war. But he was very clear with her that once she had developed any degree of concentration, but certainly a strong degree of concentration, that the thing to do with that, with a mind that had some focus, was to point it at these five aggregates, to begin to see these aspects of our experience with greater and greater clarity and greater depth. And when we do that, then we begin to relate to the world and to ourselves in a little bit healthier way, and in a way that's more clear, more accurate, and I would say also more harmonious. So I'm going to tell you a little story, and then I'll wrap it up for this evening. So the tendency is that as I said, we get identified with the five aggregates in some way, or we feel like we own them, or we have to defend them. And that just arises very, very naturally out of this way that we have a tendency to form an identity as we're growing up and as we're moving through the world. We're told that we need to do that. So that's part of the reason why it happens, actually. But as you all know, sometimes we can see the shadow of our delusion, as I call it. Delusion is delusion because you believe it. So it can be hard to see, but you can see delusion by observing the shadow of it, or by observing the times when you run into it, the error, when you see the error. So I'll give you an example of that. I was talking with a friend of mine, or actually we weren't talking. It was, and some of you have heard this story, but repetition is always good. We were in a period of silent meditation, and one of the young women who was there in the monastery where I was living in California and I were in the kitchen, and it's right next to the wood stove, and the kettle was on the wood stove, and it was whistling. Kettle was whistling, which is, it's almost like a baby crying. You like have to attend to it immediately, especially when the whole house is silent. So I went, or actually she went over and picked up the kettle. And I happened to be standing in the kitchen at the place where she would have put the hot water in. So we had these little electric pots. We would take the boiling water from the kettle and put it in the electric pot so that everybody had enough water for their coffee. We weren't always waiting for the kettle to be boiling. And because the monastery runs on tea and coffee, really, that's the truth of it. So she was going over to the electric kettle to put the boiling water in, and I was standing there getting some hot water for my coffee, and so she had to wait for a minute. And she was standing there with the kettle, and no problem. I was there. I was getting my coffee, and then it was her turn, and she put the water in. But then the next day, it turned out that I was standing there and the kettle started whistling. And so I picked up the kettle, and she was standing at the electric pot. And so I walked over to her and saw that she was standing there at the electric pot getting her, hot water. And so I was standing there waiting. And she turned to me and she said, breaking the silence, she said, "Oh, yesterday you were doing it to me, and today I'm doing it to you." And I was totally caught by surprise. Like, wait, what was I doing to you yesterday? And what are you doing to me now? I didn't think we were doing anything to each other. Right? I thought for a second, oh no, do I have to apologize? What happened? But what happened was that as she was standing there at the pot, right, at the electric pot, and I was standing there with the kettle, she felt like it was doing something to her. That's her sense of self right there. Right? Even though I'm not doing anything to her, I'm just standing there with the kettle in the same way that she had been standing there with the kettle the day before. And I didn't perceive that she was doing anything to me. So we had a good laugh about it, and we talked about, oh, wow, it looks like something is happening to you. But actually, it's just me standing there with a kettle, or you standing there with a kettle. You're doing your activity, I'm doing my activity. So it's a good it was a good moment for both of us to have a look at how that sense of self, or that sense of seeing the shadow of the delusion, could pop up. Oh, right. So when you have that moment of like, oh, wait, there's something that's not according to how I understood it, that's a moment, right? That's a moment for you to check in with how you've defined your sense of self right there. Mm. And your relationship to whatever is going on. It's like a little flag, mm, which oftentimes we don't want to see. We'd rather not observe when we notice that we're wrong, right? We'd rather not see the shadow. We'd rather not acknowledge that we understood it differently, or that there was something that we thought was happening to us, which actually wasn't about us. Mm. So that is like the mirage, right? That's the way that she imputed something, she added something onto that situation. So I offer this evening as a way for us to really begin to consider consider the our lived experience, and how this beautiful practice of really coming to some understanding of the fleeting nature of life, and how that can, ironically perhaps, actually help us find more harmony in our inner world and in our outer world. Mm. Because anytime we begin to see reality with a drop more clarity, that inevitably will bring more harmony. Mm. But just like the mirage, we have to get very close in order for that to happen. We have to become very intimate with our experience. You can't just see it from afar and work that out. You have to get very, very close to the experience and study it. And that's what the meditation is for, to help us do that. So I hope that in the future, when you look in the mirror, you have a look there and you think about how fleeting this life is. Think about how much ease can come from just knowing that simple reality, simple truth about your life. Thank you all for listening.